Thank you, Creeslough, and I'd like to thank the Minister for taking this topical issue, because I think it is important in the context of the Scoil Mhuire in Donegal that this will be dealt with, and that some form of redress will be found. I know they have gone through the processes that are there within the department, but I think that the Minister does need to look at it again as well, because I do think it comes under the criteria that the department has set out. Minister, over the past 5 years, enrolments have increased from 95 to a projected 124 for the 2018-19 academic year in Scoil Mhuire and Creeslough. They were situated in a rural area of northwest Donegal and have experienced demographic growth in recent years, with a lot of families relocating here, as it is a short commute to the busy town of Letterkenny. Now, short in Donegal standards, and because I think that's something that you have to take on board, and particularly in relation to Donegal, is that people do live quite a distance away from Letterkenny and commute into Letterkenny. It's because of the difficulties in getting adequate school spaces there, and also because people's connections to their home areas, and they're quite happy to do that. And when you live in Donegal, you have to be quite happy to travel, because you're going to have to travel no matter what you want to do. So the school is situated in an area of high economic and social deprivation, and many of the children in this JS school have very particular needs and challenges. Scoil Mhuire recently sent the staffing appeal to the Department of Education, and they have projected that they will have 124 children on the roll in September 2018. And currently there was 113, and the number needed to gain an additional teacher, so therefore they are well in excess of this. And this will be the trend for the future, as their numbers have been consistently increasing over the past few years, and they do expect this to continue because, as I said, of their closeness to Letterkenny and the fact that people want to settle there as well. And this will have an impact on the school, where you have, for example, the junior and senior infants. We have 31 pupils, first and second class 35 pupils, third and fourth class 33 pupils, and fifth and sixth class 25. So there is having a severe impact on the department's stated impact is to have less numbers of children per class, and they are in breach of that. So it is extremely difficult for any teacher to work with such large numbers at this age group, for all children deserve a learning environment that will help them learn and enhance their learning experience. Unfortunately, in a room of over 30 children and very limited space, the children are the victims and are limited to what they can do. And the delivery of curricular areas such as Astor, Drama, SPHE are all very difficult to fulfil because of the limited space and the large numbers that they have. And along with that, if that wasn't bad enough, there is a child with significant development delay, and it is also in the overcrowded classroom, and particularly in the junior or the infant classroom. And in regards to this child, she has problems with noise and coordination, and the limited space in the classroom impedes upon her and is potentially detrimental to her social and educational development. So there is all these impacts that have to be taken into account. And then also, due to the high number of children that are in the infant classroom, they have to be located in the largest classroom in the school, which is actually the furthest away from the toilets and everything, which has the added impact on them of actually having to travel the furthest distance, past the doors and everything else, and all the impacts that has in relation to them. So I think that this particular school is very important, and I think it's very important that they would be reconsidered under the scheme. And I know it steps outside probably the departmental mechanism for doing that, but there may be an opportunity for them to reapply, and I would ask the Minister maybe to consider that if that would happen. Thank you.
Pringle for raising this issue. I can understand the concern being raised with him by Scoil Mhuire. The position is, and I suppose this is a historic situation, the allocation of teachers for this coming September 2018, is based on the enrolment of September 2017, and that is applied universally across every school. In the threshold needed to get an additional teacher is 113. And as the Deputy probably knows, the present number is 111. It's just short. Now, the school did apply under the appeals process, and its case was examined under the appeals process. But that figure of the additional 2 meant that they didn't meet the normal requirement. it was looked at under this concept of particular pressure on the infant intake, but the additional children coming in junior infants, again, unfortunately, didn't meet the threshold that is set there, and it didn't meet the developing school test either. So unfortunately, the appeals board, which is entirely independent of myself as minister, it heard the case, and there isn't, unless there's a change of circumstances, the case can't be submitted again. I suppose on the positive side, obviously, if these numbers materialise in the coming September, in September 2019, an additional teacher will be appointed, and they will meet the criteria. Like it is, I've reduced, twice I've reduced the PTR, and it does mean that the enrolment requirement has come down by 2 pupils, 1 pupil in each time I reduced it, but it still, unfortunately, didn't bring Scoil Mhuire across the boundary. So I'm not in a position to indicate to the Deputy, unless there's changed circumstances from what is already known. The appeal has been heard and wasn't successful. I know that this school, I see that they did get some additional allocation in 2016-2017 in respect of resource teachers, because that was we've been consistently expanding the support for children with special education needs. But I regret to say that I'm not in a position to overrule these rules. Have to be applied uniformly across the country to every school. Has to be treated fairly, and the appeals board has its criteria, and they examine them fairly in respect of every appeal that comes their way. So I'm sorry I don't have better news for the Deputy.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Bingo.
Minister, I think there probably is, hard cases make bad law or whatever, but there is cases where the actual system that you have and the system that you operate doesn't actually facilitate a school and doing that. And I think in this case, Scoil Mhuire is in that situation where they are not ticking the boxes as far as the department is concerned, and maybe if the school could get additional information, and that will you reconsider if the additional information could be brought to bear, and additional information that would be new information, because I think that would be vitally important. Because I mean, the school basically is trying to fit under the criteria the department sets, rather than actually the department looking at the school and seeing how the school is performing. And there's no doubt that with the numbers of pupils and that the school has, that it's not it's under severe difficulty, and that really needs to be addressed. And I think you have to find some way of addressing that, because they ultimately will have way over the required number of pupils in September this year, and but it will have to be based on the following year then to get that dealt with, and I think that is wrong. And I think we need to find some way to actually look at, see that you can actually develop and expand for these particular classes in schools. And I think the impact is that it is having an urban school. While it might be a very rural area and look like a very rural area, it is actually having the impact of urban areas on it, and that has to be taken into account as well. Thanks.
I can understand what the Deputy is. He's arguing a very good case for the school in question, but the difficulty is that they're too short of the test, and that test is applied everywhere. It's not a test applied randomly. There's other than on appeal. You can look for appeal if you have 15 extra children enrolled compared to the September just gone out. The school didn't meet that test of 15. There's also a criteria for an appeal where you have an intake into junior infants of 30. Now that wouldn't apply in this case. They had an intake of substantially below that number. So unfortunately the appeal grounds were not met, and those are applied uniformly across the system. There's 3,200 schools. So unfortunately the appeal board has to deal with each of those cases fairly on its merits according to the criteria they apply.
Thank you, Minister. Number 2 is in the names of Deputies Pat Casey and Richard Boyd-Barry to discuss the sale of Enterprise Ireland's shareholding in Ardmore Studios, Bray, County Wicklow. Deputy Pat Casey.